Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I trust that you're well. My name is Juliet Ouma, the Programs Assistant at African Pharmaceutical Network. Thank you for making time to join us for this industry discussion forum this afternoon. And I want to appreciate each and every one of you. I can see a few names that are familiar to me. So Eden, Shaher, Danny, thank you. I can see you. Joel, Kajali is here. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Nisha. Thank you. Samson, thank you for joining us. So feel free to introduce yourself on the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. This particular industry discussion forum this afternoon is curated by African Pharmaceutical Network. So please expect that the speaker of the day is going to be a speaker who's from within our organization, and that is Dr. Odhiambo David, the curator of African Pharmaceutical Network. So thank you so much. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are and why you're joining us today.
Hello. Hope you all guys are doing well. So probably let's do a check-in on the chat. Just tell us where you're coming from, where you're joining us from. And if you're able to, please let us know what you're looking forward to today. Waiting to see your chats coming in. Thank you, Celestina Fichena, Vivatel Solution in Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us. Nasolo Hillary, Quality Chemical Industries Uganda. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Hillary. The reason as to why we encourage people engaging in the chats and having conversation and just introducing yourself is somebody in this meeting is probably looking for a partner somewhere, looking for somebody to connect with in your country, in your organization. You never know what you'll get. And therefore, then your network is your network. Being in that space, therefore, you're getting to meet the right people that you want to get to know about. And that is how you open up possibilities in the work that you're doing. So let's make the best of it. Thank you, Leo, from About Molecular. Understand when to report an IVD recall or RE happening in another country. Okay. A risk event. Okay. Jean Baptiste from Rwanda FDA. Thank you, Jean, for joining us. Any other persons who are there? There is no way you're joining from. And what you're hoping for as well as we build on this conversation as we move along. What are you hoping for? So for those of us who are already in the call, I'm going to bring up a poll. And the poll is also part of our, I would say, survey form so that we're able to engage in the conversation. It's a mechanism that we will be all using to engage. So on your screen, you will see a QR code and there's a form that has been shared. Just scan the code and give us some feedback here. And the question is, for how long have you known African Pharmaceutical Network? That would be the first part that we're starting the conversation from. So just scan your QR code. In case you're having a challenge, I'm going to share the link as well in the chat. So then you'll have somewhere to go back to if you need it in the chat. The link is in the chat. Those of you can't scan the code, it's there. I'm going to take only 2 minutes, then we get into the next part of the conversation. So the earlier you can log in, the better, so that we save on time as well and ensure we finish good time. For how long have you known African Pharmaceutical Network? Anybody who has logged in, just let me know in the chat if you've been able to access the channel, to the link. You have access to the link from wherever you are. Have you been able to log in? Okay, thank you, Mario, for confirming you've logged in. Okay. So if you've been able to access the form, let's just take the first part of the survey. It's an 8-part survey, quick one. Somebody has already responded. Thank you for responding. Any other person? Just notice that we have more than 45 people in the call, so I'm waiting for your feedback, team. How long have you known us? What do you know us for? Which of the following do you know us for? Then the other part is in terms of how familiar are you with the pharmacovigilance requirements in Kenya? What challenges do you have with your pharmacovigilance system, especially for those who are working in the industry and working in pharmacovigilance? Then what would you need to set up an effective pharmacovigilance system in line with the regulatory requirements? That would be a key question that we need to understand. Then the last part is, what is your rating for the session today? That will be after that, definitely. But we'll be keen just to get your perspectives as well as we move along. And ultimately, you let us know some of the things that you liked as we move through the session. So I would recommend just capture the first 3 parts of the question. That would help us. The first 3 parts of the question will be good. The other part will come after. Good. 5 responses and counting. For those who are not yet on, you still have time. We have a couple of minutes. So what I'm going to do at this particular moment, we're already 10 minutes into the session. I'll pause sharing this particular part. Then I'll give you an overview of who we are as an organization, what we do as African Pharmaceutical Network, which would take the next 5 minutes or so. Then after that, I'll bring you into the core conversation that we're having today, pharmacovigilance for marketing authorization holders in Kenya, with a focus on what are the key requirements and how do you set up your own pharmacovigilance system to ensure that it is robust enough, but is also fit for purpose in the sense that it's delivering on what the regulator expects of you. And that is the essence of this conversation today. So with that said, I've brought up my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So general rules and guidance, especially in terms of how the session will happen, you already know from if you have the chat, you can introduce yourself. I've already encouraged that. It's part of your networking, but also part of engaging with other people in the conversation that we're having today. Your microphone and cameras are muted to avoid distraction during the call, but towards the Q&A session, we will have those open for you to contribute and just share your perspective reflections in terms of what you'd hope for, what you've learned for the day, but also any questions that you might have. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end. I've already mentioned that, but also as much as we're moving on with the Q&A session will be at the end, we encourage you to use the Q&A button, which is at the top of the screen. There is a Q&A button. Use it to raise any question that you have as we move through the session. Then we'll be able to answer some of those questions. And therefore, then that sets the stage for our conversation. So who are we as an organization? African Pharmaceutical Network is a platform, and our essence of coming in as a platform be a place where stakeholders can come together to share knowledge, share policies, and most importantly, nurture key partnership that will ensure we guarantee there's reliable access to safe, effective, and quality medicines in Africa. And the essence of this platform coming into perspective is that we have limited local capacity in the African pharmaceutical market, and therefore there's room for us to strengthen that. We have segregated and disjointed systems within the industry with room for us to link them together. And that is where the partnership piece becomes a critical enabler. And ultimately, then we needed that common platform. And we're hoping that African Pharmaceutical Network becomes the platform to drive this conversation to strengthen the local pharmaceutical industry. And how do we do this? That links to our mission. We have investment and work, a lot of work within the pharmaceutical workforce development. And for those who are saying training, yes, the Pharmacy Academy is specifically targeted at that. And the training is linked towards one, the people who are getting into the industry or aspiring to get into the pharmaceutical industry and don't know how to get started. We have training that are tailored to different unique skill areas that are necessary, including regulatory affairs, pharmacovigilance and patient safety, and the pharmaceutical supply chain management. And we have additional other training programs that are being developed at the moment with industry experts to guarantee that we are helping build capacity for what the industry needs for the next phase of growth. We offer technical support and business ecosystem support services, including consulting for some of your projects, and we'll be able to support where there's need for that. And ultimately, the last piece is the African pharma market is not as shaped as it should be. And therefore, can we shape those markets? And the market shaping work is around influencing policies, initiating some policy conversation and getting things to happen where they need to be for sustainable business models of practice, but also for reliable access to quality products that people need for their quality healthcare outcomes. To do all these, we have to be guided by a set of principles and values. And our key value number one is that we're all human at the start of it. And therefore, we have to put that at the core of everything that we do. Integrity and ethics, and therefore we have to do the right thing, regardless of what it's going to cost us, whether it's the result are not going to be good. But we believe that if you do the right thing, you get the result that you're hoping for, and therefore that is success on your way. As professionals, we're keen on making a difference, and therefore we have to uphold professionalism and conduct, and even how we engage with other people in our venture. And we aspire that that becomes a model of influence to the industry and everybody we engage with in the course of our work. Plan creation, when we engage for the different services that I've already mentioned, what do we offer? What do we do? We hope that whatever value we create to you is of essence. And this kind of forum, for example, at the end of this, you've seen for those who've gone through the soul survey, what do you like and what can we improve on? The essence is we need to create value for you. And as we're creating value for you, we are creating the future that we aspire for the pharmaceutical industry. Last and finally, teamwork. We work as a team. If we shape the industry, it's not individuals, but it is all of us working to deliver on that vision. And we're hoping that we can mobilize you to be a member of the team to help us deliver on this vision as we walk through the journey. So how has it been for us since we started off? This is the journey that we walked. We started in 2020, and this is 2025. So 5 years down the line, we'll be still doing the work. Initially, we conceptualized it in 2020, backdrop of COVID-19. And the key questions we were asking ourselves, everybody was saying how the continent would be impacted, but not much was happening in terms of, okay, let us try to reimagine a different future. And our essence was bring different people with different networks of work and different expertise to start having this conversation that, like the one that we have today. And in doing that, we're able to shape the future that we envision, that we aspire for, rather than sitting back and complaining and waiting. 2021, we convened a couple of industry discussion forums like the one we're having today, and ultimately that seeded the possibilities and the work that we are building on, and we are furthering that work through the years as we move along. We've invested in our training and workforce development through the first partnership in 2022. That is where we're moving on. Then 2023, mid-year, we launched the Pharmacy Academy, which is our flagship institute focusing on training pharmaceutical professionals in the continent for the pharma industry. And we've built on our partnership pipeline. Then as we're moving along, we're already building on this next frontier of what we hope to achieve. What services do we bring to the industry? The workforce development I've mentioned, regulatory support services, including pharmacovigilance, business ecosystem support from market research, intelligence, talent solutions, all that you need will be able to support and engage. Where we don't have the capability, we link you with some of our partners within the network who are able to support in whatever needs you have. Last but not the least, shaping markets and shaping policies where we need to move. These are some of our partners, and we're still building on. So if you're in an organization that you think you could be a key partner in any of the key areas, do reach out to us through our email, secretariat@africanpharmanetwork.net, and I'd be glad to follow up and see what can we do together. How do we strengthen pharmaceutical systems in Africa, for Africa, and to guarantee that the people who need medicines and healthcare products will get the products they need in the right way. So that is a call to action. Contracts are for some of the services we offer if you need them. Partner with us to deliver solution, but also for those who are looking towards building their skills, join us through the Pharmacy Academy and learn with us, either in the courses that already exist or the new one that are in development, so that we build on the industry that we aspire for. And most importantly, enable each of us to get the careers that we aspire for, but also get
David, we lost you there for a bit. We can't hear you. Apologies about that. Please give us a few minutes to resolve the technical issue that we're having on our end. But in the meantime, please give me a thumbs up if you're able to hear me. Then you can also resolve the issue on David's end. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tahir. In the meantime, we'll just check if David is able to hear us. David, please confirm that you are able to hear us. Mm-hmm.
Let me know if you guys can hear me now. Can hear me? Fantastic. Thank you. I see the thumbs up there. Sorry, I had a technical challenge. I'm back now. So I was saying, at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, how do we ensure that we comply with these regulatory requirements? And it is not about an issue of compliance. It's a matter of protecting patients' interests and safeguarding the patient's interests in the sense that we guarantee they get the quality product that they need. And in case of any side effects or any adverse outcomes in terms of the use of those products, they're able to get the care that they need. And therefore, that is the core of this conversation that we are having today. Let me know if you can see my screen as I brought the slide on pharmacovigilance for marketing authorization holders in Kenya. Can see the screen. Fantastic. Thank you. Great. So if you can see the screen, the question that we ask ourselves is, we already started from there. Why is pharmacovigilance? And that is a critical piece, and that is where the foundation of all that we're doing starts from. As a science, pharmacovigilance focuses on detecting, assessing, understanding and preventing adverse effects or any other possible drug-related problems with the aim of ensuring that the patient who is using that medicine is not being impacted negatively with that particular product or technology that they're using. Initially, it started from pharmacovigilance, looking at the pharmaceutical side, but then we have vigilance as a core concept that looks at vigilance in pharmaceutical products. We're looking at vigilance within health products and technology, that is medical devices, in vitro diagnostics. We have radiotherapies and all that. So we have to ensure that each and every health product and technology that is in use in human subject, that is being used by patients to either treat, to manage, or to regulate in particular healthcare concern, is of the right safety, efficacy, and quality. And therefore, we have systems that in case they don't work, they will be solved. And the aim at the end of the day is always to improve patient care and safety in relation to the use, improving public health and safety in relation to that use. So there's the patient care for the patient, but looking at the public health and safety aspect, and that is where you'll say, okay, I'm looking out for this one patient, but based on one outcome of a particular incident that was noted on patient A, do we institute regulatory controls and safeguards that will protect the general public who are at risk of either using that product or not using it? And that becomes the public health imperative for pharmacovigilance. And the essence of it is to detect problems related to this use. And after detecting, we don't stop there. We communicate the findings to ensure that those findings can be used to inform decisions, whether do we recall a product from the market? Do we add additional guidance and considerations on what controls need to be put in place? Do we contribute to the assessment of benefits, harm effectiveness, and risk of medicine? And normally when you look at the requirements and regulatory provision, they normally talk about risk-benefit analysis and risk-benefit profile of that particular product. And that is a principle in regulatory affairs where you establish whether, before I bring a product to the market, does it have a favorable risk-benefit ratio? Because it has more harm than good, there's no need of having the product in the market. And therefore, when you're thinking as a professional, as a pharmacovigilance specialist, or as a professional within the pharmacovigilance space, ask yourself whether that product has a favorable risk-benefit ratio. Because if it has a favorable risk-benefit ratio, then it has a need to be in the market. If it doesn't, then the question is, should it really be maintained? And that is where you come in as a specialist. And you carry the safe, rational, and more effective use of the health products, promoting understanding, education, and clinical training on pharmacovigilance, and the effective communication to the public, because that safety information is relevant for the public. Why is it important? Especially because most of the current conversations on pharmacovigilance and even what we're dealing about now, when we look at the last mile access, is harm that can happen after the product has been registered and is made available for use. And the reason as to why this is important is because of the different buckets that you see in my screen at the moment. When you look at research and development, and this is mostly mapping the pipeline for product from the initial discovery to the patient use at the point of care, there are gaps that exist in that ecosystem that makes pharmacovigilance important. One, clinical trials are normally conducted in a small number of patients, which means our diversity as human subjects and individuals who might be getting to interact with these products and technologies will not fully be represented in the study, which means the risk that might be experienced by David is not the same risk that would be experienced by Millicent or by any other person in that context. So then, with that limitation in terms of patient population, some of the risks will not be identified during the studies, and therefore they need to be monitored. In the event that they do happen, they can be mitigated, resolved, and actually avoided in subsequent cases. And the other thing is, clinical trials are normally conducted in ideal patients. These are patients with no comorbidities. They're not using other medications or other products. And when you look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria for clinical trials, there are certain measures that are in place. So in this context, what we keep around pharmacovigilance is you will use a medicine that you're using an anti-malarial, you're using anti-diabetic, you're using an anti-hypertensive medicine. So all these medications that you're using, comorbidities and all, will make you react differently or experience the effect of the drug differently from what it would have been seen in patients during clinical studies. So that makes it critical to have these monitoring happening. And they also do not provide for long-term safety studies, because studies will happen for a short period, then the product is already validated, it's in the market. It's longer in the market than it is during the initial development, if at all it gets to be registered. Case example, most clinical research and development work will take between 10 to 15 years or so. But then after that, you'll realize most of the medicines that we're using are already off patent, and patents will take 10 to 20 years if they go through the extensions and all that. And therefore, for example, the antibiotics, 1940s to now, we are talking about 80 years plus. Back insulin, we had celebrated 100 years of insulin being in use. Therefore, the period that was taken to develop insulin as a product for medical use to the period that it has been in use after is totally different. Therefore, there will be safety concerns that might arise that need to be regulated for. So those makes it important when you look at the research and development side. On the clinical use side, we have diverse patient population with different genetic profiles. So we need to have representation of all of these people, and we need to monitor for how they'll react differently. And we're dealing with real patients with real complications. I already mentioned this. Then multi-use of products with risk of interaction, drug-drug interaction, drug food, and all the other pieces. And then extensive pool of healthcare professionals who are monitoring the product. There's a patient or a doctor in one case who is sensitized to the particular product, and therefore they will not see the reaction that the patient is exhibiting. But another doctor will see it and will find it as a unique experience, and therefore they will report it. With that diversity of HCP experiences, healthcare professional experiences, you're able to identify some of those gaps, which makes it valid. And post-use, there are long-term safety concerns with the product that will need to be observed, whether it's genotoxicity, carcinogenicity, and all that. The improvements need to be made on a product. You maybe need to repurpose it. For example, we talk about sildenafil. Pulmonary hypertension, now it's used for erectile dysfunction and all that. It is a result of post-market surveillance and pharmacovigilance related work. And the environmental impact of medicines and health products will always not be accounted for initially, but they will be monitored over time. And currently, I know I read a report recently that was talking about the environmental impact of waste, pharmaceutical waste that is being disposed in our environment, and ultimately finding back their way back into our food systems, our water systems, and all that. And also, what is the implication in terms of human reproduction, human quality of life, and all that. So those are key things that we need to look at. So guided by that, the question is, from a Kenyan standpoint, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board being our regulator, what is the legal framework for pharmacovigilance in Kenya? It starts from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board Act, that is CAP 244 of the Health Laws Amendment and the Health Laws Amendment 2019. CAP 244 is a regulatory act of parliament that mandates Pharmacy and Poisons Board to execute the regulatory function. Health Laws Amendment Act 2019 gave in provisions for additional safeguards in pharmacovigilance, but most importantly, linked it from the point of a devolved system of governance where there's need for additional pharmacovigilance activities at the county level, the devolved function, and the national function, and all of these needed to be coordinated. Then from that, we have Kenyan National Pharmaceutical Policy, and the policy looks at what do we aspire for into the future, and what framework do we need to put in place in the current moment. And some of the key aspirations is that as much as we're building the local industry, we're building growth of the industry and growth of the profession, we need to ensure that the products that are being accessed are safe, effective, and quality. And the only way we guarantee that is to build local systems, but also to protect against any external products that are coming into the market from harming the general public and population within the country. Then from the policy and the Act of Parliament, we have the regulations, which is the rules, Pharmacy and Poisons Rules for Pharmacovigilance Post-Market Surveillance, published in 2022, that now outline the specific functions. And then lastly, the guidelines on safety and vigilance of health products and technologies in Kenyan ecosystem. And that is the guideline that we need to follow as we are applying our responsibilities in pharmacovigilance. So with that said, ultimately, you'd realize that what I'm going to talk about in terms of the obligations, the requirements, and all that will be based on the guidelines. We understand the legal framework, then the legal framework tells us what do we need to do, how do we need to do it, and where do we need to do it. So when you come into the market, and this is going to be a crash course on regulatory affairs, all the health products and technologies that we all have in our market are regulated. And regulation means you submitted evidence and information on the quality, safety, and efficacy of the product. You met all the regulatory and administrative requirements, and you've proven to the regulator that the product is safe for use and has a need in the market, so that it should be registered and made available. That is the first part. But when you do that, therefore, then you become the marketing authorization holder. You are authorized to market that product for use in that particular country, in that market. So you have legal obligations and responsibilities associated with that product. And therefore, with that, you're expected that in case of any safety, quality defects, or any concerns, you will also take responsibility for that. And that is why the regulator will expect you to have a robust and functional pharmacovigilance system. Some of the obligations that will be expected of you by the virtue of having a product in the market is one, submission of the respective reports, the individual case safety reports, and that includes, for example, for the medical devices, you look at field safety corrective actions, the individual adverse events, and all that could be observed. So the case safety reports need to be reported. Periodic safety update reports or periodic risk benefit evaluation reports. We have risk management plans, and especially for medical devices already now are listed there. We have adverse events, we have field safety corrective actions and field safety notices, and then risk management plans and all needs to be reported. Then you have to maintain pharmacovigilance system master file. And these actually system master file should come before the submission, because it is that system master file that will outline how will you fulfill these requirements for reporting, requirements for monitoring, requirements for diagnosing where the probable risk could come from. But the expectation is, from a submission standpoint, the regulator does not want you to submit it, but will request for it when they need it. It can be either during an inspection or during a particular audit, or just as an inquiry when they're reviewing some of their compliance requirements in the market. And some of the times, the key piece that you will see, for example, those who make marketing authorization applications, the regulator would request you to submit a risk mitigation plan or an environmental risk assessment, especially for biosimilars, biotherapeutics, and biological products. So those are part of the pharmacovigilance. And then another requirement is to conduct post-authorization studies. And these post-authorization studies can include post-authorization safety studies. You are monitoring if there are any safety concerns that might arise after the authorization of the product. And these are normally required at the point of the product just being launched in the market, especially if it's a very new product. It's not a generic or whatever it is. So it's an innovator molecule, limited experience in the market, and therefore you need to see, are there probably likely to be safety concerns? And then other time is, are there possible failure to work, the efficacy concern that might arise? So that is where we look at post-authorization efficacy studies, PAES, in this context. And for you to meet those requirements, those obligations that you have as an MAH, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board requires that you have at your disposal a qualified person for pharmacovigilance, the QPPV. And this links to the recent memo that they sent out last month, where they were calling for all marketing authorization holders to employ or have a contracted third-party representative serving as their qualified person for pharmacovigilance. And what does that mean for you? You have a designated specialist, and that designated specialist becomes the first point of contact and the main point of contact with the regulator. So you have to, as an MAH, you train that person on QPPV. They ensure they have the sufficient authority. And their sense of authority is, sometimes you might be contracted or you might contract somebody who doesn't have the, I would say, the authority and the responsibility and the mandate to change system and to shape the system as they should be, which means there's a risk. And that risk has to be mitigated. And the only way to mitigate is having the contractual implication outlined in clear provision. So then somebody has to bear the cost or bear the consequence of failing to monitor and develop robust systems. And that QPV is expected to implement PV activities, participate in risk management planning when necessary, participate in preparation of regulatory actions such as variation, gen safety restrictions. So any documentation to be submitted that has a safety component to it, this QPPV has a responsibility to review and to support in the development and in the actual dissemination. They have to influence the performance of the quality system, which means the quality system must be cognizant of safety concerns that might be necessary in the market. And then submission of information to the board by the MAH, so that is their responsibility in terms of coordinating it, whether in collaboration with other departments or as a sole entity responsible for that. And the MAH has to ensure that there are appropriate processes, resources, and communication mechanisms, and access to all relevant information for the fulfillment of the QPPV's responsibilities. Do you have the list of the products that you're managing in that market? Do you have an understanding of the probable risks associated with each of the different products? Do you have a mechanism of communicating that, especially either to the development side or to the regulatory side for fulfillment, and even to the market stakeholders? For example, you're distributing through a third party, distributing to a hospital specifically. How is that communication channel in place so that in case of a market action, we need to have a record? We need to communicate a dear healthcare professional letter, notice of information, or its update in safety. What system do you have in place in that context? And ultimately, the contract has to be written with the QPPV. So when you're counting a QPPV, what is expected by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is that you submit the CV of the person, and from a Pharmacy and Poisons Board, that should be a pharmacist in that context. It should have a description of the responsibilities, guaranteeing that the person has the sufficient authority already mentioned. Details of backup arrangements. We all can't be there 24 hours, 24/7, 365 days a year. And therefore, there will be times we are not available, either on annual leave or sickness or any other condition. What are backup arrangement? Do you have an alternate QPPV, a backup QPPV? Do you have a specialist in the company who can step in on their behalf? And what are the provision? And is there a contract to specify that? So those are key things. A list of tasks that have been delegated by the qualified person and to whom these tasks have been delegated, if at all they're delegating any responsibilities. And then finally, any changes or updates to all the appointment criteria and the conditions will be notified to the regulator within 30 calendar days. 30 calendar days is 1 month, so you need to be able to certify that. Qualifications, I already said, TP pharmacist with good pharmacovigilance practice training, certifications, whatever that could be. Receive mandatory refresher training after every 2 years, at least once in 2 years. So you need to have that in place. They have to understand the applicable Kenya safety monitoring legislation and the guidelines, and already gave you the legal framework, demonstrating knowledge in the implementation of activities, and that is the understanding of the pharmacovigilance system master file, letter of designation, that's the official contract, and that once you nominate them and the regulator receives your nomination, they will write a letter confirming that appointment, meaning they are acknowledging that person. So if you don't have a designated person who has received a letter of designation from the regulator, then you need to follow up and ensure that is in place and that is fulfilled. And that person should be qualified by the training and experience relevant to their assigned responsibilities. They should be demonstrating that they understand what they're doing. For the backup that I talked about, qualification the same as that of a QPPV. They have to have all the necessary information to fulfill the role. They meet all the requirements. They receive training as well as what is expected for the QPPV, and they shall have knowledge of applicable requirements and guidelines in the country. And the expectation is the QPPV and the backup QPV is to have them residing in Kenya. Because in case of a market action within the country, we need somebody who will be able to coordinate it from within the country and make it as easy as possible. Therefore, you need to ask yourself, okay, how do I set up those mechanisms and processes in place? So what do we expect of the QPPV? Maintaining the MA holder pharmacovigilance system master file, having oversight of that system in its entirety and the quality management system. You're the main point of contact to the regulator, that is the board. Prepare, review, and implement standard operating procedures for PV activities. And you need to know which PV activities, from the preparatory phase to the execution of a market action if there's need for that. So you need to see that. Being aware of the validation status of the adverse reaction database if applicable. And normally this is applicable because in case of any adverse reactions, have you kind of tried them? Have you developed a repository in the database? Can you go back to them in case of a market requirement? And that is important for you. Then you need to establish and maintain a system that ensures that information about all suspected adverse drug reaction are reported to the personnel of marketing authorization holder, whether it's medical representatives, to the medical affairs, anybody in the company, even if you have an administrator, a front office person. In case of an adverse event reporting that comes in, how will they manage it? How do they coordinate that? And that links to training for all the staff of the company on pharmacovigilance requirement and obligation, especially about receiving, relaying, and processing that information. They don't need to process it in doing the deep science research. But in case they see, for example, there's somebody complaining about products X, a paracetamol tablet on X or on Facebook or on TikTok, can they send that material to you if it is your brand? And if they do it, how does it go through? How do you triage it and all that? So that needs to be done. And you submit the information to the regulator. I already talked about those reports that are required of you, including the post-registration safety studies, the risk management plan, and any ongoing evaluation during post-registration period. All requests from the board, you have to ensure that they are addressed, and therefore you also evaluate any risk-benefit ratio of a marketed product as per the board's requirement if necessary. And you oversee the safety profile of the company's marketed products. And that is where I was saying, you know all the products you're managing. For all those products, you have a system of diagnosing and saying, this is the probable risk, and this is how we are mitigating for it. So that it's a live document, it's an action process in action, so that you're able to mitigate any risks. Ensuring all personnel are appraised of their activities in pharmacovigilance. I already talked about that. So key is for you to have those systems, whether you're monitoring adverse drug events and all that, and mostly the last one to the regulator. And the question is, some of the times is, do you have to employ somebody? Can you outsource these services and all that? The regulator acknowledges sometimes there are resource constraints, and therefore you might not be able to have a full-time QPPV in your organization. And that is also linked with the number of products that you're overseeing and managing and all that. So they provide for outsourcing. So in outsourcing, what are the provisions? You have to get a QPPV who has the qualifications that we already talked about, whether it's education, experience, trainings, and all that, that will be met. If they are employed by a third party, even if their usual working address is an office other than that of your office, then they shall be indicated and the name of the company where they're working from indicated. So if it is David today who has contracted Juliet as the qualified person for pharmacovigilance, then when I'm indicating the letter to the Pharmacy and Poison Board, I will indicate where Juliet, the office where she's working for. So if it's with African Pharmaceutical Network and then company X, then company X appoints Juliet of African Pharmaceutical Network as the qualified person for pharmacovigilance for the execution of XY functions for products A, B, C, D within this period of time. And these are the access rights that they have to oversee that function. So that has to be communicated. You ultimately retain the full authority and responsibility for the completeness and accuracy of the pharmacovigilance system master file, because the product is yours. It's not the contracted parties. But in your contract with that person, you have to stipulate and specify what are the extent to which they are responsible, and therefore it puts a mechanism of you holding that person accountable, but also ensuring you meet your regulatory requirements and obligation. The outsourcing company shall supply the board with a copy of the contract. Well, now it's not an appointment as a letter of employment. It is a contract of third-party service provider vendor agreement. So you need to provide that to the regulator. On the other side, we are supplying the CV and the contract for that employee. Then description of the activities that that person will be executing. Are they responsible for monitoring? Are they responsible for signal management, safety communications, recall activities? What scope are they involved in? The QPPVs working at the outsourced companies shall supply the board with a valid annual practice license. Somebody must be in good professional standing to be able to serve as a QPPV. So they must be registered and licensed to practice as a pharmacist, and therefore that is key. The outsourcing services shall be limited to not more than five companies per nominated QPPV. So one QPPV cannot serve more than 5 companies, and that is also linked to the number of products that they're managing. So with all those requirements met, what are some of the sanctions if somebody doesn't meet those requirements? If you fail to comply with the requirement, whether as a marketing authorization holder, a local technical representative, or as a qualified person for pharmacovigilance, there are sanctions, and this sanction will be dependent on the classification, on how much risk do you pose to the public, how much risk do you pose to the patient, and how flawed is your pharmacovigilance system that exposes these risks to be a key concern and a key pain point. And normally there are 3 classification systems. We have the critical, major, and the minor classification categories. So the critical ones are where you have a substantial lapse in your pharmacovigilance system, and there's a risk of a serious violation or serious harm to the patients or to the public who might be using your product. So that is a critical finding. Then we have major, not so critical, but there's a substantial deficit in your systems. Probably you don't have even somebody who is standing in to oversee that process. You don't have a monitoring mechanism and all that. So those are key risks, and especially depending on the product category that you have. Then you have minor. Minor could be a situation where there was an update in your leaflet and that was not communicated. It could either be affecting something around increased frequency of use of a product instead of a reduction. So it is something that should have been reported, but it wasn't reported. So these are systemic lapses in a system, which is normal but needs to be avoided as much as possible and regulated for. So based on those 3 criteria, the regulator has sanctions and for each of those offenses. So normally for critical, either you have an important safety warning omitted, a QPPV non-compliance, you don't even have a QPPV. And this is why the notice that came last month is a critical one. If you don't have a qualified person for pharmacovigilance, then the question somebody is asking is, how do you guarantee that you will protect the public, that you will ensure the product meets the safety, efficacy, and quality standard that is expected with nobody to oversee that process? And then failure to operate a comprehensive system. What would happen if you fail to meet or you have commit all those offenses? Product recall, suspension or revocation of your license to sell that product in the market, early reinspection within 12 months. They might come in and reinspect your facility if at all you were inspected earlier. And if not, it will be the initial inspection that will be happening. So you need to be critical. And when that inspection happens, chances are there will be findings, and those findings will not be good for you because they can end up back to the revocation of the license, product recalls, or suspension of your operation for a period of time, which is not good for business, but also not good for the reputation of the company. There will be listing of companies, the backlog listing, they talk about that as well. Urgent safety restriction, a delay in approval of marketing authorization applications or variation of marketing authorization holders. So those delays can happen in the sense that I don't have a pharmacovigilance system and I'm planning to register another product. That is exposing the public to more harm. So why would we approve that product? It won't happen from a regulatory standpoint, and that is what the regulator is saying. So you need to look out for such. For the major one, repeat findings due to failure of marketing authorization holder to implement previous CAPAs, corrective action, preventive actions, or either the findings were not adequately addressed or were necessary, or there's a change in prescribing information without filing for a variation. These are major, but you will only be subjected to fines, and non-compliance statement, which could be a warning notice from the regulator or an infringement notice that will be coming from the regulator on what you are not doing and what you should be doing. Minors with the delays of submissions or non-submission of safety letters will get a warning letter, or delays in approval of your retention of products, especially for the subsequent years when you need to have the product. And if you know, Pharmacy and Poisons Board have annual retention, they have the periodic renewal, then we have registration and all the other regulatory activities. So these are some of the sanctions that might arise in execution of your functions. As we come to the end, within the pharmacovigilance space as an organization, we offer some services that might be of value to you, to your company, or to the organization that you're engaging with. And these include, we can serve as your QPPV as outsourced pharmacovigilance services, where we have a system in place. We offer pharmacovigilance training under the Pharmacy Academy, so the pharmacovigilance and patient safety. Then, in case you're recruiting for talent, we have some trained people who already meet the criteria of what the regulator is asking for. So if you want to have your own internal system with a QPPV in-house, we're able to support you in terms of sourcing for talent, talent management. If you don't want to have the headache of managing talent in-house, we'll be able to support you. And if you want to build a system and you have somebody already, or you are working in the organization and you're keen on designing your own internal pharmacovigilance systems, we'd be more than glad to walk the journey with you, help you kind of work through the processes, build capability, so that at the end of the day, you have a robust pharmacovigilance system, you're meeting the requirements, but most importantly, you're safeguarding public health and looking out for patients that we're all serving by getting innovative, quality health products and technologies in the market for people who need them. With that, I'll go back to the questions now, unless somebody has any comments here with me. I can see there's a question that is already here. Can the superintendent pharmacist of a company also be the QPPV? Yes, it is possible, but the key consideration is what other responsibilities and functions do you have? And the risk that comes here with regulators, and I remember there's a last conversation we had with the Pharmacy and Poisons Board last year, and the concern was you'll have a single pharmacist in the company who has quality assurance functions, supply chain functions, regulatory functions, and now pharmacovigilance as well. Ultimately, that person's bandwidth is split, and therefore they cannot continuously monitor these safety concerns unless they have 1 to 2 products, maximum 5. So then that is a consideration that you need to ask yourself. And most of the times when you make that request for the company pharmacies to be the QPPV, the question will be, what other responsibilities do they have in the company? Because you don't want to be in a situation where it's just an administrative requirement, you've met it, yes, we have a QPPV, but they will not perform the function, because that will only solve part of the problem, and they will not have a pharmacovigilance system in place, they will not have the time to monitor and report those requirements, so that is a risk. So I hope that helps you understand the concern here, Gangi. If one is a QPPV of one MAH, can he be at the same time the backup QPP for another MAH? Yes, there's that provision that applies, but the question is, how are you the QPPV of one MAH at that particular point? And what I mean here is, if you are contracted as a third-party service provider, that is agreeable because it's a contract, it's not a full-time employment. If you are on full-time employment, any point that you take additional backup QPPV function for another company, the risk is you are infringing on labor laws. That's number one. Number two, what bandwidth do you have to be able to step in as a QPPV for that other company when your core functions and who will be attending to your core functions in these other employment obligations that you have. So you need to be able to balance that and be able to answer those questions. I hope that helps you, Million. Any other questions? I'm in the Q&A section now, trying to see because the chat have responded to the ones that were there. No question in the Q&A. Okay, there's a question here. Is there a limit of how many MAH you can have in your portfolio to be a QPPV for? There's requirement, and it's when you look at the initial slide that I was sharing, they were saying not more than 5. So a QPPV cannot serve more than 5 companies, and that is based on the level of effort. And sometimes it would be reviewed based on the number of products in the 5 companies that you're serving as a QPPV for. Because if there are more companies, more products in that portfolio, you will not tell me that you will review 50 product lists every month, and then you add another set of products in other companies. That will be probable. So which means one of the processes and the activity that you're performing will have failed. And if they fail, that is a risk to the public, and that is where the regulator will not permit for that. I hope that helps you, Venetian. Thank you so much. Can you please elaborate more? So, Million, probably just raise your hand, then I can unmute you so that I get to understand your question better. Yes, I've unmuted you, so please raise your question. You can unmute. Please unmute and ask your question. In the interim, as we do that, I'm going back to the slide that the survey that we were having, guys. I'm asking of you to give us your feedback. Let's get your feedback as we move towards the end of the session. Million, please unmute and just ask your question. Can you see my screen?
Yes, the screen is on.
Okay, thank you. So those who are not yet, please scan the QR code, give us your feedback. And now those who stopped at question 3, you can go to question 4, 5, up to number 8. The good thing is the questions are not as many. So yes. Is a question there, Juliet? Help me check it out.
Questions, yes. Emilia received that he's able to see your screen, but I'm not able to speak.
Have you unmuted your microphone? Because I've already permitted you to unmute your microphone. Your microphone is enabled, so yes, you can unmute. You should be able to unmute fast. For those who are here, please feedback. We are 76, so I'm hoping we can get 30 or 40 responses with this. QR code is here. The link is already shared in the chat. Juliet, help me share the link as well on your end. Somewhat familiar, 60%, 30% not familiar at all, 10% very familiar. Good to know. We are hoping we'll be able to move the 60 and 30% to the 40, 10% so that we have a fully formed market. The challenges that you have with your pharmacovigilance system, about lack of information or awareness of regulatory requirements at 3%, limited resources for pharmacovigilance activity 31%. And I would say this is why the regulator provides for external or third-party QPPVs and all that, because then you have somebody who can help you execute on the functions without the full budgetary commitment and contracting obligation that you have in employing somebody internally. So the regulator is trying to look at flexibility around that. Lack of expertise to develop and maintain PV systems. And that is where now I would say, as an organization, we are keen on working with those who need the support. We offer that as part of our technical capability support services. So we can have a conversation, do reach out to us to see where we can support. What support would you need to set up an effective pharmacovigilance system in line with the regulatory requirements? Resources, that is expertise, and the training there, continuous training and resources. I think we are in a position to support where we can there. Do reach out to us and template to know requirements for PPB. Software for monitoring and analyzing ADRs. There are software that already exist, and there are some that are still being developed as well. You need strong regulatory guidance and collaboration with the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, supported by trained personnel who understand. Good pharmacovigilance practice, a reliable reporting and data management system must be in place to ensure that adverse drug reactions are captured, analyzed, and acted upon. Adequate resources, definitely agree. Commitment, middle leadership, and an ethical approach to communication and decision making are essential to ensure transparency. So I would say that is at organizational level, but also in the market level regulator. Training and mentorship, that is definitely our specialty. So do reach out to us for those who need additional training, need additional resources. We are more than glad to walk this journey with you and support you. Assessing PV risk management, definitely. So when you look at PV risk management, is reviewing your systems first of all. So for those who are saying, okay, expertise to design your own system and all, one of the key things that we're working and actually doing in this space is, how do we work with the organization? One, we do an audit of your system. And this is not regulatory audit for the regulator, it is regulatory audit for your own systems. One, to understand where your systems are, to diagnose some of the areas of improvement and where we can support your journey. Then ultimately supporting you in developing the new processes so that at the end of that engagement, we diagnose where the problem is, we scope what needs to happen. And when the scoping phase, what we do is, can we understand which products you have in your portfolio? Can we understand what are the probable risks in each of the different categories? Then that now informs us on what system do we design with and for you, so that at the end of the day, it can be maintained long-term. And ultimately also coming up with systems for continued maintenance and operationalization beyond our engagement with you as you work in that space. You're waiting for the session today. Thank you. 4.65. We are hopeful we will be able to get the other part. What did you like about the session today? It's informative, knowledge about vigilance, pharmaco and non-pharmaco, informative. The presenters, okay, thank you so much for that. I'm glad that you guys liked it. And what I love most is what can I improve on? Keep up the good work. More discussion on medical devices in Kenya, definitely. That is something that we're taking note of, and we're coming in with a couple of engagement, especially in medical device regulation. And in that case, we are looking at medical devices, in vitro diagnostics, and all the other ancillary health products and technologies that are regulated within the regulatory scheme with Pharmacy and Poisons Board. So there's more work that we can look at. More time allocation, definitely, I think we will increase more. Normally we have 1.5, and we thought this would be a shorter one. More sessions, yes, we will. Elaborate more on SOPs and other documents. I would say the standard operating procedures will be dependent on your own internal operations, and that is where the technical support comes in handy. Translation to French, that is a growth area. Definitely, thank you for bringing that up. We will let you know end of session value. So that's good. Thank you. Great. We have 25 responses. For those of you who might not be able to share your responses now, I would encourage that if you get some time, and we will share this feedback form with you again. So those who are not able to respond, please do respond, give us your feedback, and where you feel we can support you in driving your pharmacovigilance activities, do let us know and we'll be glad to engage. For Million's question, I don't think you are able to get to me again. Okay, the email address should be secretariat. Let me just text that for you now. Yes, because you are unable to speak, what I would say is you can reach out to me as well on the email for further guidance. But what happens is the QPPV in one MAH can be the backup only if you are contracted as a third-party service provider. And it is dependent on the number of products that you have. If you are a QPPV for one company with, let's say, for example, 10 products, the assumption is within a month of 30 days, 20 working days, you'd be able to dedicate 1 day for each of the products if you are looking at monitoring safety information in the ecosystem where you're operating. So, number one, you can manage 10 products in half of the period if you dedicate 1 day per product per month, because the monitoring is regularly. So that is number one. But if you have to serve as a backup in another company, then the 10 is allowed. If you go beyond that, you get 20 products. You will not guarantee that you will be able to manage 30 products or so as a QPPV, which means you are dedicated full-time. The expectation is that you're overseeing these products to serve as a backup for another person. Unless in your own context, you also have another backup such that when you are committed with these other obligations, then you have a mechanism for that person to step in. So I hope that kind of helps bring clarity, Million. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Great. Anybody else with a question? If there's none, I think we come to the end of the session, and apologies first for the technical glitch that we experienced today. And I'm hoping that we will make improvements as we move along. And for those who have any concerns, any queries, do reach out to us. We'll be able to engage and support where we can as we further strengthen our pharmacovigilance and pharmaceutical systems in the region. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.